Clean out your desk by Friday. 4 words in a text message. That's how my founder's son ended 18 years. No call, no meeting, no explanation beyond a follow-up email from HR that arrived 11 minutes later, professional and cold, the kind of language designed by lawyers to communicate everything while admitting nothing. Effective date of separation, this Friday. Benefits continuation through end of month. Please return your badge and any company-issued equipment at your earliest convenience. My name is Ray Callahan. I'm 53 years old, and I had just been fired from ClearPath Health Systems, the company I had spent the better part of 2 decades building from a 2-room office in suburban Columbus, Ohio, into one of the most respected hospital software platforms in the country. I read the text 3 times standing in the parking garage of the main hospital complex, where I just spent 4 hours presenting our latest integration data to a client. I was still holding my laptop bag. My coffee was still warm. The founder's son had chosen a Tuesday afternoon in March to do this. 21 days before my annual profit-sharing distribution was scheduled to process $103,000. The payment I had been owed, contractually, for the past year of work. The payment that Derek Aldridge had apparently decided wasn't worth honoring. What Derek didn't know, because he'd never bothered to read the documents his father had signed, was that the $103,000 wasn't just money, it was a key. And behind that key was a door that would bring down every deal he had bragged about closing since the day he walked into the executive suite. I drove home on autopilot. The afternoon was gray and flat, the kind of Ohio sky that looks like the world has just given up. I passed the strip malls and the highway exits and the neighborhoods I had driven through 1,000 times, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not panic, just a strange, buzzing calm, the kind that settles over you when a situation finally stops being theoretical. My wife was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked at my face and put down her dish towel. What happened? Derek fired me. She didn't move for a moment. Tell me. Text message. 4 words. Clean out my desk by Friday. She sat down at the kitchen table. We'd been married 26 years. She'd watched me through the all-nighters in the early days when the company was nothing, through the times I missed dinners and weekends and 2 of our sons' baseball playoff games because a hospital system in Tennessee had a critical software failure at 3 in the morning. She knew this company in a way that Derek Aldridge never would, because she had lived in its shadow the same way I had. The profit share, she said, 21 days away. He's trying to cut you out before it pays. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question I had been hoping she wouldn't. What about the clause? I looked at her. He just triggered it. Let me tell you about Arthur Aldridge, because without him, none of what happened next would have been possible. Arthur founded ClearPath 11 years before I arrived. He was a former hospital administrator, the kind of man who had spent 30 years watching healthcare systems fail their patients because of bad information flow, and he had decided to do something about it. When I joined as head of software development, the company had 14 employees and a platform that worked well in theory and crashed constantly in practice. We spent 3 years rebuilding everything from the ground up. I designed what we eventually called the Nexus platform, the core architecture that tied every module together, the system that made ClearPath software actually function the way Arthur had always imagined it could. By the time we finished, we had something no competitor had come close to building. A unified patient data environment that could integrate with any hospital's existing infrastructure in under 6 weeks. Clean, reliable, ours. Arthur called me into his office one evening after everyone else had gone home. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon and slid one across his desk, the kind of gesture that meant the conversation was going to matter. I want to tell you something I haven't told anyone else, he said. Not the board, not my wife, not my son. He explained it carefully. Years ago, before Derek had any interest in the company, Arthur had structured my profit-sharing arrangement differently from every other employee's compensation. My annual distribution wasn't just a bonus tied to performance metrics. It was a legal trigger. Once the payment processed, co-ownership rights to the Nexus platform's core architecture would automatically transfer to me through an agreement already held in escrow, drafted by an outside attorney Arthur had hired specifically, so it would have no connection to ClearPath's internal legal team. You built it, Arthur said. It's only right that you have a stake in it that nobody can take away. Not a board of directors, not a new investor, not a CEO who didn't earn it. I set down my glass. Arthur, that's the company's most valuable asset. It's both of ours. I've seen what happens when founders step back and the wrong people step in. They sell things they didn't build and gut the rest. If that ever happens here, I want you to have something that protects what we created." He paused. "And I want ClearPath to have a reason to keep you." I had thought he was being cautious to the point of paranoia. Arthur was a careful man, a planner who thought 3 steps ahead on everything, but this felt like contingency planning for a disaster he had no real reason to expect. Sitting at my home desk that Tuesday evening, watching the clock in the corner of my screen, I understood. Arthur had seen it coming before his own son had been old enough to be a threat. The man had spent 30 years in hospital administration. He understood institutional failure at a level most people never reached. 20 days, 18 hours, 41 minutes. I spent the next morning going through the technical checklist I had quietly prepared over the past 6 months. The kind of quiet preparation that happens when you start sensing that something in an organization has shifted and the ground beneath you is less solid than it looks. Every line of the Nexus platform's core architecture was stored in 3 encrypted environments, 1 local, 2 off-site, all protected by authentication only I could provide. Derek's IT team would not find a single useful file on my old workstation. They would find a clean machine and a lot of placeholder folders that looked like archives. I had also reviewed the escrow agreement twice in the previous month. The language was airtight in the way that only gets achieved when a lawyer is working for a single client with a single objective. Once my profit-sharing payment processed through ClearPath's payroll system, the co-ownership transfer would execute automatically. No signatures required, no approval from any board. Arthur had structured it to be frictionless on purpose, because he knew that friction was how these things got blocked. I set up one additional measure. An automated email, timed to send 4 hours after the distribution date if no active licensing agreement had been renewed. The recipients were the 2 lead attorneys at NovaBridge Health, the regional health conglomerate that had been in acquisition discussions with ClearPath for the past 8 months. The message was 3 sentences. It noted that, as of the distribution date, the licensing rights for the Nexus platform's core architecture would be held jointly, and that any acquisition agreement which did not account for this would contain a material deficiency under Section 9 of the existing due diligence disclosure framework. Section 9. The Technology Ownership Verification Clause. Standard language in every healthcare IT acquisition. Except Derek had apparently skimmed it the same way he had skimmed every other document he had signed since taking over as CEO. I went downstairs. My wife had made dinner. We ate at the kitchen table and didn't talk much about work, which was unusual for us, and she refilled my water glass without me asking, which was her way of saying she was worried. After dinner, I sat on the back porch and watched the neighborhood settle into evening. My phone showed 4 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them sit. The first indication that things were moving came Wednesday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when my email produced a message from someone identifying herself as a freelance journalist covering healthcare technology sector deals. She had heard, through sources she declined to identify, that there had been a significant personnel change at ClearPath Health Systems involving a senior executive. She was asking whether the departure had any connection to the pending NovaBridge acquisition. I wrote back 5 words. Ask them about Section 9. That was all it took. By noon, ClearPath stock had dropped 9%. By 2 in the afternoon, it had given up another 4. The financial news platforms were running brief items about unconfirmed questions regarding the NovaBridge deal. One outlet used the phrase unexpected complexity in the technology licensing framework. Another described it as due diligence irregularities that may affect the acquisition timeline. Inside ClearPath's headquarters, I could imagine what was happening. Derek calling emergency meetings, the legal team pulling contracts they hadn't reviewed carefully, the board asking questions that Derek couldn't answer without admitting he had fired a key executive without reading his employment agreement. And somewhere in the building, probably in a conference room on the 4th floor, Arthur Aldridge's phone ringing with news that would make an old man's jaw tighten. My phone rang that afternoon. It was Marcus Webb, the engineer I had been mentoring for the past 7 years. He was 36, technically exceptional, and had more integrity than most people twice his age. "Mr. Callahan, I need you to know something." "Go ahead." Derek's VP of engineering position just opened up. He offered it to me this morning, $240,000 base. Said I'd have full authority over the development team. I waited. I told him I needed to think about it. Then I went back to my desk, and I thought about every single thing you've taught me about what it means to do this work right. And I called you. You don't owe me anything, Marcus. You taught me that the architecture you build reflects the values you hold. I can't build anything worth a damn under someone like Derek. I'm not taking it. Something loosened in my chest that I hadn't realized had been tight. I appreciate that more than I can say. One more thing. He had someone from IT try to pull the Nexus source files from your old terminal this morning. They were in there for 3 hours. They won't find anything useful. That's what I figured. Just wanted you to know the scope of the panic. After we hung up, I sat for a long time. Marcus had made a decision that cost him real money, real advancement. He had done it because of something he believed, not something I had asked for. That was the only part of those 18 years I knew for certain had mattered. My wife appeared in the doorway of my home office with a sandwich and a look that said she had been watching me work for too long. Come eat. I'm fine. You haven't left that chair in 6 hours. You look like you did during the Tennessee integration crisis. This is different, is it? She set the plate on the corner of the desk. You're doing the same thing you always do. You're managing the situation from a distance because it's the only place you feel in control. But you're not eating and you're not sleeping. And your doctor told you 6 months ago that the blood pressure numbers were not acceptable. She wasn't wrong. My physician had flagged elevated readings twice in the past year and had used the word serious in a way that he hadn't used before. I had told my wife we'd deal with it after the Nova Bridge deal closed. She had given me a look at the time that I understood now had been patient in the specific way that has an expiration date. There's a version of this where you let the system do what it was designed to do, she said, and you spend the next 3 weeks actually resting. Have you considered that? I'm watching to make sure nothing goes sideways. Nothing is going to go sideways. Arthur built it that way. She sat down across from me. This isn't really about the money or the IP anymore, is it? I didn't answer right away. You need Derek to understand what he threw away. You need it to be undeniable, not for revenge. You're not built that way, but you spent 18 years building something that matters, and a 32-year-old who's never shipped a single line of code looked at you like you were overhead. She paused. That has to be accounted for. She was right, the way she was always right about the things I couldn't say clearly myself. I needed the work to be validated by something bigger than my own assessment of it. I needed the market to confirm what I had known for years, and what Derek had never bothered to understand. Finish it, she said. Then we're going to Vermont like we planned. No laptop, no exceptions. Deal. 17 days, 4 hours, 12 minutes. The call I had been expecting came Thursday afternoon. Not from Derek, from the General Counsel of Novabridge Health, a methodical man named Graham Forsyth, who had a reputation in the industry for being difficult to surprise and impossible to rush. Mr. Callahan, I'll be direct with you. My team has been reviewing the technology licensing section of the ClearPath due diligence package, and we have questions about the Nexus platform's ownership structure that ClearPath's legal team has been unable to answer to our satisfaction. What specifically are they unable to answer? Whether the ownership is clean, whether the rights are held entirely by ClearPath, or whether there are any outstanding co-ownership provisions that would survive a full acquisition. I kept my voice even. The escrow agreement governing those rights was executed 8 years ago. The language is explicit. Your team should request a copy directly from the escrow attorney on record. Her name is Patricia Howe. Columbus, Ohio. Silence on the line. Then, carefully, are you saying such an agreement exists? I'm saying you should call Patricia Howe. He let out a breath. Mr. Callahan, I want to be transparent with you. If there are complications with the ownership structure that affect the value of the platform, this acquisition may not proceed in its current form. I understand. Would you be open to a conversation about alternative arrangements? When you've spoken to Miss Howe, call me back. He called back in 40 minutes. The conversation was shorter and considerably more direct. By the time we hung up, I knew that Novabridge had suspended their acquisition timeline, pending further legal review. Their press release went out at 5 o'clock. 3 careful sentences that contained the phrase, material ownership questions, and avoided any mention of Derek Aldridge's name. ClearPath stock dropped another 11% before the market closed. My phone started producing messages from numbers I didn't recognize, interleaved with a flood of financial news alerts. Someone had leaked the Novabridge internal memo to 3 different news outlets simultaneously. One of the headlines read, ClearPath acquisition stalls over executive separation dispute. Another was more direct. Founder's son faces board questions after deal collapses. I found a news live stream running outside ClearPath's Columbus headquarters. The founder's son was leaving the building with his jacket collar turned up, walking quickly toward a waiting car, not looking at the cameras. He looked like a man who had spent the previous 48 hours discovering exactly how much he didn't know. My phone buzzed with a text from an unlisted number. The message was 4 sentences long. The sender identified himself as a board member. He apologized for how the separation had been handled. He said the board had not been informed in advance of my termination. He asked whether there was any path to resolution. I didn't respond. Not because I was being strategic, but because there genuinely wasn't anything to say. The path had been the contract. The contract was clear. Everything proceeding from this point was the natural consequence of what the founder's son had chosen to do on a Tuesday afternoon when he thought he was cutting costs. 14 days, 9 hours, 53 minutes. The next week moved in layers. Each morning I checked the countdown and the news cycle and found that both were proceeding exactly as they should, the clock ticking down and the story getting louder in the spaces between. A national healthcare technology publication ran a long piece on the ClearPath situation that quoted 3 anonymous sources from inside the company. The picture that emerged was not flattering to Derek's leadership. Decisions made without consulting the technical team. Contracts signed without adequate review. Key personnel treated as interchangeable parts rather than the architects of the company's actual value. One source used the phrase institutionalized negligence, and the phrase stuck because it was precise. Arthur reached out on a Wednesday evening, not by text or email, but by phone, old-fashioned, his voice sounding older than I remembered it. "Ray, I owe you an apology. You don't. I should have structured the transition better. I gave Derek the title without making sure he understood what he was responsible for. That's on me. You built the protection I needed. You thought of this before I did." He was quiet for a moment. Patricia called me. She said Novabridge's attorney reached out. "They're reviewing their options. What are your intentions?" I had thought about this carefully. I have no interest in damaging ClearPath. The people who work there didn't make Derek's decisions. What I intend to do is honor what you and I built together, which means making sure it ends up in the right hands. Arthur exhaled slowly. "Bill would have been proud of how you've handled this." I didn't know who he was referring to, but the sentiment landed the way it was intended. "We'll get through it," I said. Derek is no longer on the executive team as of this morning. The board asked for his resignation. I sat with that information. I had expected to feel something sharp and satisfying when it came. What I actually felt was quiet, not hollow, just settled. The way a room feels after furniture has finally been arranged correctly. "What about the company?" I asked. "It'll survive. We have good people. We always did." He paused. "You take care of yourself, Ray. Your wife's right about the blood pressure." I didn't ask how he knew that. Arthur was the kind of man who paid attention to everything. The call that changed the shape of what came next arrived 11 days before the distribution date. The caller was the Chief Technology Officer of Novabridge Health, a woman named Elaine Cortez, who had a reputation for building strong teams and keeping them. She didn't use pleasantries for longer than necessary. "Mr. Callahan, Novabridge has been reviewing its strategy for the ClearPath acquisition, and we've arrived at a conclusion that I imagine won't surprise you. The value of ClearPath's platform is not separable from the people who built it. We've read your background extensively. Every major contract they've won in the past decade has your fingerprints on it." "That's accurate. We'd like to explore a direct engagement with you, not through ClearPath. With you, personally, specifically around the Nexus platform's ongoing development and the integration work that would be required for our hospital network." "What does that look like?" She sent the proposal within the hour. A 3-year consulting agreement, $88,000 per quarter for part-time engagement, equity participation in the platform's deployment revenue, complete authority over technical decisions within the integration scope, the right to bring my own team. I forwarded it to my attorney with a single line. "This is the right deal. Let's finalize." His response came back in under 10 minutes. He used the word exceptional twice, which he never does. 9 days, 2 hours, 14 minutes. The morning the distribution processed, I was sitting on the back porch with my coffee, watching the yard come alive in the early light. My wife was still asleep. The neighborhood was quiet in the specific way it gets before 7 in the morning, before anyone else has started their engines or their obligations. I went upstairs at 11:50 and opened my laptop. The screen showed the automated system running normally. The escrow account confirmed pending. The countdown read 8 minutes, 41 seconds. My wife stood in the doorway in her robe. "You ready?" "Yeah." She came and stood next to me, her hand on my shoulder, watching the numbers the way you watch something that has been a long time coming. At exactly 12 noon, 3 notifications appeared in sequence. Payroll distribution confirmed. Escrow trigger executed. Transfer document generated. I opened the PDF. Co-ownership certificate for the Nexus platform core architecture. Joint holders, ClearPath Health Systems and Raymond T. Callahan. Individually. 18 years. A morning in a parking garage in Columbus. Arthur's bourbon and his foresight. $103,000 as a key for a door nobody else knew existed. It was mine. I saved the document in 4 locations, sent it to my attorney with one line "it's done," and closed the laptop. "That's it?" my wife asked. "That's it." She hugged me from behind, her arms around my shoulders, and I put my hand over hers, and we stayed that way for a while without saying anything. The room was quiet. Outside, a bird was making noise in the oak tree in the backyard that we had planted the year our son was born. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. Like I want to sleep for 3 days. She laughed, which was the right response. "Vermont?" Then, Vermont. We left 2 days later. I spent those 2 days signing the Nova Bridge agreement, getting Marcus formally on paper as technical director of what we were calling Callahan Systems Group, and reaching out to 2 other engineers from ClearPath who had spent years earning more than they were given credit for. Both accepted within the hour. One of them sent a voice message that included the words "I've been waiting for this," and then laughed in a way that made my wife smile when I played it for her over dinner. The drive to Vermont took most of a day. We stopped twice, once for gas and once because my wife wanted coffee from a specific place she remembered from a trip we had taken years ago and had never been back to. The coffee was exactly as good as she remembered. She looked pleased with herself about this in a way I found genuinely endearing. The cabin was on a lake about 40 minutes north of Burlington, surrounded by trees that were just beginning to show the first green at their tips. We unpacked slowly, without urgency, and made dinner together in the small kitchen, and ate it at a table by the window watching the last light come off the water. I left my phone in the bedroom, not as a statement, just because I didn't need it. My wife reached across the table at one point and held my hand the way she had done when we were dating, with both of hers around mine, and we didn't talk for a while. "Tell me something," she said eventually. "Regrets? About leaving? About any of it?" I thought about the 18 years, honestly, the way you can only do when you're far enough away from them that they look like what they actually were, rather than what they felt like at the time. The all-nighters, the missed weekends, the Suns baseball games I hadn't made it to, the blood pressure readings I had promised to address and hadn't, the times I had chosen the company over the people who deserved my presence more than any client did. "Some?" I said. "The right ones?" "I think so." She squeezed my hand. "Arthur called while you were unloading the car. He said to tell you the board has stabilized and the people on your team are doing good work." "Good." He also said, and I'm quoting directly here, that if you don't actually rest on this trip, he'll come up there himself and confiscate your laptop. I laughed. It was the first real one in longer than I could precisely measure. "Tell him I don't have it." "He won't believe you." "Tell him anyway." The next morning I woke up early and sat on the dock while the mist was still on the water. The lake was completely still. I had a cup of coffee and a book I had been meaning to read for 2 years, and I read 40 pages of it before my wife appeared with her own coffee and sat in the chair next to mine, and neither of us felt the need to say anything for a long time. My phone stayed inside. The news cycle had moved on. ClearPath was someone else's problem now, navigating its way forward under new leadership with a cleaner understanding of what it actually owned and what it didn't. Nova Bridge was reviewing a revised acquisition structure that my attorney said would come to a workable resolution. Marcus had already sent me 3 updates that I had read once and not replied to, because he didn't need me to reply. He needed the space to do the work, and the work was in good hands. A week into Vermont, my son drove up from Boston with his family. He was 31 now, a civil engineer, perpetually calm in the way of people who spend their professional lives calculating load tolerances and are not easily alarmed. His daughter was 4 and had recently decided that fishing was the most important activity available to a person of any age. She said this with the authority of someone who had been fishing exactly twice. I took her out on the dock the first morning with a rod that was considerably too large for her and showed her how to hold it, the way my own father had shown me when I was not much bigger than she was now. She was extremely serious about this. She asked me 3 questions in a row that each required a longer answer than I expected, and I gave her the honest versions because that's what she seemed to want. "Grandpa, what did you do when you had to work?" "I built systems that helped hospitals take care of sick people." "Are you going to keep doing it?" "For a little while longer. Then I'll show your dad how to do it, and some people I trust, and then I'll retire and take you fishing more often." She considered this. "How much more often?" "As often as you want." She nodded with great satisfaction. as though this had been the correct answer to a test she had been administering, and went back to watching her line. My wife came down to the dock an hour later with 2 cups of coffee and stood for a moment watching us from the shore before walking out to join us. She looked at me with the expression she has when she's satisfied with how something has turned out, not triumphant, just settled. "You look better," she said. "I feel better." And I did. The tightness in my chest that I had grown so accustomed to that I had started thinking of it as normal had been quietly receding since the day we arrived. My blood pressure was something I was actually going to deal with now. Not because of a doctor's warning, but because I had run out of reasons to defer it. 3 years of consulting, flexible hours, work I controlled on terms I set, with people who had earned their place. At 56, done. Actually done. Derek Aldridge had sent a message through an intermediary 2 weeks after his resignation, something about wishing me well and hoping there were no hard feelings. I had not responded because there was nothing to say. He wasn't a bad person. He was an unprepared one, handed more authority than his preparation could support, and the consequences had done what consequences do. The night before my son and his family left, we all sat on the dock, watching the stars come out one by one over the lake. My granddaughter fell asleep against my arm before the sky was fully dark. My son sat next to me and we talked quietly about his work, his daughter, the house he and his wife were thinking about buying, the ordinary things that make up a life when the extraordinary parts have settled. He asked me at one point, the way adult children sometimes do when they think you might finally be ready to hear the question, whether I was happy with how it had all gone. I looked at the water. I thought about 18 years and the work they had contained. I thought about Marcus turning down $240,000 because of something he believed. I thought about Arthur's voice on the phone, older than I remembered. I thought about my wife's hand on my shoulder at noon on a Thursday when 3 notifications appeared on a screen and everything shifted. "Mostly," I said. He nodded like that was the honest answer he had been hoping for. Above us, the stars were the kind you can only see when you're far from cities, and the noise that cities make. The accumulated hum of everything urgent and demanding and temporary. They had been there before the company. They would be there after everything I had built had been updated and replaced and eventually forgotten, the way all systems are, eventually replaced. What remains, if you're lucky, is the people you trained well enough that they don't need you anymore. The ones who turned down better offers because they believed in something you showed them was worth believing in. A text arrived from Marcus at 11 that night. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity is a hard habit to shake. He had resolved a complex integration issue for a hospital in Phoenix that had been pending for 3 weeks. He had done it cleanly, without consulting me, using a method that was better than the one I would have suggested. I wrote back 2 words, "Well done." He responded immediately, "Learned from the best." I set the phone face down on the nightstand and lay in the dark listening to the lake and to my wife's steady breathing and to the particular silence of a place where nothing is on fire and nothing needs putting out. 18 years. A text message. 4 words. Derek Aldridge had thought he was eliminating overhead. What he had done was hand me the only future I had actually wanted. On terms I would have spent another decade waiting to negotiate for myself. I was 53 years old. I had 3 years of work left, on my terms, with people worth working for. After that,
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, know it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to.
There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.